G'day expats and welcome to another episode of Expat Chat. As always, joined with my co-host, friend, colleague, mentor, Brett Evans, who is the Managing Director in the EMEA region. G'day, Brett. How you going?
Mate, well, thanks. And getting through the year, it's scary. It's when we start talking about budget season, it's like
I
we're
know.
almost halfway through the year. So,
I
and
know.
not to be rude, just got to tell the folks in the background, who are listening and watching, who the Siamese twin of me is. Same voice, same looks, same everything. Ladies and gentlemen, on your left, my right, James Ridley, who's the Managing Director for the Asia and Americas region in APAC. G'day, mate.
G'day. And I mean, another episode today, episode 83, and you're coming fresh and hot off the heels of that webinar that was on just the other night when we talked about property and I suppose managing your finances and mortgage and your property portfolio, given the current interest rate environment that we're in right now. I really wonder how much higher rates can go. We've only got another decision, next week, and we just seen those CPI figures come out as well. I mean, they were relatively in line with probably expectations, but it would have been nice to see a bit more of a drop in the actual of it cooling.
Yeah, look, I think in that, in the webinar this week, I think the theme was one swallow doesn't make a summer, and
yeah,
I think that's the biggest thing. There's a lot of things playing out. There's a lot of shenanigans going on, and we had 470 something punters on the webinar, which is fantastic.
Yeah.
So we'll actually include the link below for folks who want to watch that. Sterling effort by Jeremy, not so much by myself. Jeremy, for the folks who don't know who Jeremy is, he's the Managing Director of Atlas Mortgages. He's our mortgage broker. Was really doing a deep dive into refinancing, what expats options are and stuff like that. So I'll include that in the link below. But look, babe, we're in this, and I mean, Jeremy and I are reading from the same hymn sheet. Spring is when we're going to have true transparency. Aussie spring, that is, not Northern Hemisphere. To me, there's just, people are hanging on tooth and nail, and some of the numbers that I was looking at, insolvency business-wise, I mean, the headlines on the Aussie papers daily almost, building company goes bust, building company goes bust. There's certainly a lot of other companies out there that are going bust. Not to say that the wheels have fallen off. Yep, we're now back to pre-COVID levels, so don't grab the life jackets yet, folks. But it's something we need to watch to see if that extends. If that extends, then we will see unemployment rising and everything.
Well, when you guys were deep diving into that data, what really hit home for me was that savings ratio where it's now negative because people are having to grab out of their current saving from obviously the previous periods to fund their current lifestyle, pay their mortgages. And we know Governor Lowe, he's constantly harped on about how everyone's got plenty in the coffers, plenty in the offset accounts, the redraws from all the stimulus throughout COVID-19. But now people are eating into that. And obviously that's going to have a time limit on it. You've got that very large cohort of fixed rate mortgages kicking out from now. It's not a cliff. It's going to be more of a slow burn, but the very big numbers kick out in June. And I believe it was August. I think 15% of the current fixed rate mortgage market that's on the 2%, they kick out in June. So I agree. Spring's probably the time where it's been a few months that they now have moved from fixed to variable. And then that's where you'll see a bit more pain and see sort of, I suppose we'll get a read on the amount or the stats that'll come out on mortgage stress. And, what they define mortgage stress as, I believe, Brett, you might be able to actually correct me on this, is 50% or more of their household income is spent on mortgage repayments alone. So right now you've got a very large or very deep and large belts around a lot of the major cities that are very red because a lot of those suburbs are in mortgage stress. So you really want to know what Governor Lowe is going to do there, where you've got unemployment rate very low, you got inflation still quite high, and we know that's going to take some time. I don't know how much higher he can really go. I'm of the mind that you can really probably only go one more time, to be honest. And I don't know whether he's going to do that next week or whether he's going to wait and pause for another 2 months and then do it closer to maybe July, August, because it's usually a case where they pause around the budget time as well.
They don't want to be seen to be swaying or giving one political party the benefit of the other. But the other thing is if you leave a rate rise or a rate reduction too far down the track, its effectiveness gets diluted. Whereas if they're trying to get people to force them to slow down, you smash them successively.
Yep.
It's like that game at the kids' arcades where the head pops up and you hit it with a hammer. That's what the RBA is trying to do right now with the consumers. Whereas if you give it a couple of months, then do it, it's going to shift the needle, but it's not going to have the same effect of slow down, guys. I mean, it's funny how I was thinking this other day. People say, "Oh, March property turned positive. The end is here, and it's good times ahead." I liken it to the property market rallying in COVID when we're going through lockdown, and it's funny how one person can shift the needle, because what happens is normally in a suburb you might have 20, 30, 40 properties listed.
Yeah.
But when you have the inventory issues that everyone's having right now, when there's only one property listed, it just takes one person to turn up and pay above the odds. And that person has pushed it by 10%. Even though there's probably 10,000 houses in a suburb, that one person.
That's right. The stats can get easily skewed to show, obviously, that, the market's changed. And I guess it's too early to say the market's changed, but it's funny how many media publications are starting to report, oh no, we've hit the floor now. It's starting to obviously move in the right direction. And even a lot of, I suppose, investment advisors, a lot of other financial advisors that I speak to, they think we've hit the floor and it's going to start moving in the right direction. But I just can't see us hitting the floor just yet because of that very large cohort of fixed rate mortgage payers. They've been shielded from all these increases. They've still got to feel the same pain that the average household has been feeling for the last 6 months, for the next 3 or 4 months. And then, we might be hitting the floor maybe the end of the year, early next year.
1/4 of the mortgage market. It's a quarter of it's 880,000 mortgages. I mean, we're talking pretty big numbers here. So, and that's why, I don't think the 4 horses of the apocalypse are coming around the corner tomorrow, and people shouldn't start, grabbing baked beans and heading for the caves.
Yep.
But I just don't think the game has been played out just yet. I think inventory is the key thing. When inventory is tight, you could have one person come in with a heap of cash and makes the market look good by paying at or above odds. Whereas when we have 10 properties listed instead of 1, now you're seeing the true flavour of what's going on. But
sample size needs to be a lot bigger. That's right.
Exactly. It's not what we learn at university. It's not statistically significant.
That's right. Yeah.
Now try and say that with a few beers under your belt. So, but mate, let's jump into episode 83. Today we're talking about how to manage your financial affairs when you don't know if or when you are returning to Australia. And it's a problem that we see time in, time out. And to me, where I sit, it's becoming more of a problem because Australia was always seen as the cheaper destination and lifestyle destination, and there was that draw card there. But now that Australia is so bloody expensive, people are now seriously going, well, maybe we don't return to Australia just yet. Maybe we look at somewhere else. So people get this analysis paralysis where they don't know whether to zig or zag. And the reason being is, when you live overseas, you're confronted with a vastly large array of opportunities in terms of managing financial affairs than when you're living in Australia. So, and it's like a new car. People are like, I want to test drive that, I test drive that. But to me, good financial advice is elegant and simple. And there's a high degree of flexibility and malleability with it. Anything that's built that is too structured or too rigid is fraught with risk. It's going to break at the slightest change. Something big like COVID or something small like a change in employment. We always talk about, regardless of what happens with a change in life or change in the environment, you still need to keep working towards your goals. What's that flag in the sand you've set at age 60, whether it's a dollar amount, whether it's a lifestyle, or both. You need to keep working towards that on a daily basis. But I think where people get stuck is they don't know what to do now because they don't know what's ahead for the next 5 or 10 or 15 years. And they sometimes do nothing.
That's right. And I mean, you're right. Analysis paralysis. And it's having that understanding as to whether you think you will return to Australia, not now, not in 10 years, but 15 years, but ideally maybe when you want to retire, that's when you want to rest your hat because it provides some sort of reassurance that you have an understanding of the system, how things operate. But you've got that 10, 15, 25 year gap. Okay, well, what I need to be doing in between now and then, because it's very likely I'm not going to stay in the current country I'm in. I might be in another 3 or 5 or 7 or 8 countries. Another concept is the ping pong expat. They come back for Australia for 2 or 3 years and they go again, and makes it very hard for them to firm up on their own plans. And again, analysis paralysis. Do we buy property? Do we invest in property? Do we have main residence? Do we, start a self-managed super fund? Do we contribute to that retirement account? Do we build up a share portfolio? It's, it's very difficult when you really lay it like that. But you're right. You need to stay flexible and nimble, something that can adapt with your changing circumstances.
Yeah, to me, it's sometimes some people know the address, they know the street, they know the house number, they know the color of the house. And other times people don't know the country. But we can still work towards a goal in both situations, and absolutely. I think I was crunching the numbers the other day, and about from the Dubai office point of view, about 20% of our clients don't retire straight away to Australia.
No.
Now, when you initially talk to them, you say, okay, when are you going to retire, or where are you going to retire to? And they say, oh, I'm not retiring to Australia. I'm going to Spain, Portugal, Thailand, or wherever it might be.
That's right.
Cool. But I said, after that 5 or 10 year stint, what then? Oh, then I'm going to return to Australia. So you are going to retire to Australia. And I said, here's a scenario. You accumulate assets offshore to fund your retirement in Thailand or Spain or Portugal, wherever. But then when it comes time to return to Australia, you're 70, 75, you want to be back in Oz for, good health care and, clean environment and that sort of stuff. But now all your assets are outside of your name. You're repatriating to Australia and you can't get it all into super. Whereas, as I said, there's one client who's looking at Italy. And I said, think about this scenario. You focus on your super account from age 50 to 60. Really just hammer that thing home. And then you retire in Italy at 60, from 60 to 70, which is great. You can draw on an allocated pension out of your Australian super account, tax-free out of Australia. But then at age 70, when you want to go back to Australia, nothing changes. All that happens is you change it, you sign a form to change your address, and nothing happens. And that's what I was saying before about not wanting to rebuild and break down and new accounts and close accounts and stuff like that. You don't have to go to that point. But if expats keep their eyes up and look a long way out, they get an idea as to where things need to be positioned. A lot of our clients who would never actually retire to Australia or return to Australia permanently, they'll visit family and stuff, still use Australia to house their assets because it reduces the risk of sovereignty risk and legislative risk. And a lot of those risks that are out there, people can move from Spain to France to Thailand, but not having to move accounts with them as they go and rebuild it.
Yeah.
They can still draw on those Australian investment and savings accounts. We talk before about non-taxable assets and investment accounts. I've got one client who's using one of those actually as a super account. And the reason being is he's got that account in Australia, domiciled in Australia, no capital gains tax, invested globally, and he just draws out what he needs out of that account. So, but he's got full liquidity and flexibility. So to me, I think people get too stuck in the miniature details, whereas by analysis for us is doing nothing, not getting anywhere, and they're with so much change in people's circumstances. What we talk about is, okay, let's play the probability game. So, or like a science experiment, there's the control experiment. What's the control? Well, the control is you're an Australian. Okay, no refute about that. Everything else is open to subjective. So let's play that highest probability, that control, that you are an Australian. So let's accumulate assets in Australia. If you want to change your mind down the track in 10 years' time and say, no, I'm retiring to the UK, I'm retiring to wherever it might be, you can always move it down the track. Yeah. But at least in that 10-year period, you are now becoming, closer to your goals because you're doing something. Yeah. Whereas,
and I mean, and I mean, taking that a step further, you're not going to worry about super unless you're giving up your citizenship of Australia. And I don't know too many Aussies that are ever going to do that. So, and I agree with you. I mean, super is something which it is technically and usually the longest investment that we'll have in our lifetime. And that's just by accident because of our first employer in Australia putting away those super guarantee contributions. And then usually if we head abroad, we don't pay it any more attention. But when we stack it up against and you look at super and you compare it to all the different retirement schemes around the world in different countries, it really is probably the most concessionally taxed and the most advantaged. And I'm sure there's a few clients listening in that are in the US and that argue that against Roths and all those sort of things. But when you look at how much you can contribute each year, the maximum tax rate in accumulation phase being 15%, long-term capital gains that you realize whilst you're in accumulation phase is only 10%. And if you're using the right type of super fund, you can move it all to account-based pension mode, and that can be a tax-free transaction. And then it's all tax exempt. Income you're drawing doesn't get reported in your income tax return. Franking credits fully refunded to you. Opportunities to still boost it as well, depending on obviously those different types of contribution caps. It really is, I believe, and obviously we're biased, but probably the best investment or retirement strategy that you can really use when you compare it and stack it up against all the ones around the world. And
we sit here and we see everything. We see all the options.
Yeah, that's right. And I guess I get to see a lot of the Asia Pacific ones, the 401ks. They're obviously very, very big, and the IRAs over in the US. You've got the provident funds throughout Southeast Asia. You've got a lot of the international retirement plans, which depending on your employer, it's often a case where it's just invested in, typically it's just an investment account. You can actually draw it whenever you want, or when you leave your employer, there's no ties to you actually having to. That's exactly right. And usually it's based out of Isle of Man, I should say. You've got limited investment options. There's a bit of a contribution there, but it's not technically usually in the best of investment options because of who's in control of those kind of retirement plans. So I guess we know super is going to be part of the equation when you do retire. So it does mean we need to give it some attention, whether you're not going to be home 5, 10, 15, 25 years. The hardest task that I often have with clients that look to come on board, and they might be late 40s, early 50s. They know they're coming back when they're 60, 65. They have not contributed to super for the 25, 30 years that they've been away. Their super has dwindled to almost nothing. And then we've got 10 years to try and move all the wealth that they've built up outside of super into super. But again, we're hamstrung by those contribution caps. Technically, that person should have a super balance well above $1 million by now, but they don't. It's closer to 50,000. It's like, great, we've got this or X amount of years to get it up to 1.6, 1.7 million. We can do it, but it requires the right strategy. And it also requires a bit of luck sometimes, depending on the Australian government who is in power.
As they're dialing rates up and down. It's interesting you talk about the Australian government, because I was having a spirited debate, but a nice detailed conversation with a gentleman here who's quite a senior executive in Dubai. And he's like, oh, look, Albo's got to change super and it's got to do all this stuff. And I explained to him, I said, okay, let's break down the numbers from your point of view. He has talked about, 3 million as the tax-free cap, so to speak.
Yep.
So I said, that's per person. So you and your wife, $6 million. Now, I think you can afford that, and he agreed. And then I said, what if I said in retirement phase, I can give you, on probably at least half of your income, a 30% bonus on top of that. And he's just like, what do you mean? How does that work? And I said, well, don't forget, if ANZ or Telstra or NAB pay you a dividend, you might get $1 per share, but you'll also get back 30 cents in franking credits refunded to you by the ATO. So instead of getting $1 per share like everyone else, you're getting $1.30. And he's just like, wait a minute, what happened? Yeah, and then he started to click. And I said, let's look at the scorched earth scenario. Let's say, for example, age 60, you tell me you're not going to retire to Australia ever again. Yep. You retire overseas, you have a ball. Easy. Convert the account into an allocated pension, do 100% drawdown, take your money overseas and go. But I said, what super's done is it's kept you on that path and accountable to your retirement goals in a very tax advantageous way, but also in a way that you can't rob from Peter to pay Paul. People often go, oh, I need 50 here, and suddenly their goals get derailed and off it goes from there. So to me, you just need to pick your North Star. Your North Star for most Australian expats, I'd say 98% of us, is Australia. Whether you retire there or not is irrelevant. But, we always talk about the 4 key risks, for expats. currency, geopolitical, sovereignty, and legislative risk. Those are the 4 big things that affect Australians. If you can mitigate those risks and still every day get one step closer to where you want to be in retirement, that's a win.
Yeah.
Now, change is a constant in life. Become an expat, magnify it by 10. So you can't control that. So I think people are trying to control too many things. To me, I say control what you can control. You can control where you put your money and how much and how you structure it. Everything else is time.
That new piece of legislation, the whole $3 million balance. I mean, people got to realize that that's the present value in only a few years' time. These things are indexed. So even though it's $3 million for that additional tax, whilst you're in accumulation mode, remember in 10 years' time, that $3 million might be $4.5 million, which means if you're a couple, you can have up to $9 million without getting hit with it. So,
and that's the big debate right now about the indexing, because Albo's saying no indexing, and Stephen Johnson saying no indexing. But the thing is, they're not even going to talk at the legislation until the next election. Then there's nothing to stop Libs coming in and saying we're going to index it.
We're going to scrap it. Yeah.
Yeah. And I said to myself, okay, but let's say it doesn't happen. It's going to affect 10% of superannuants in 30 years. I said, mate, I hate to say it, but you'll be dead by then anyway. So it's not a concern. You're getting stuck in the later when you should be focused on the now.
A really good example of how quick legislation pieces can change. To our listeners, I'm not sure if you heard about the New South Wales stamp duty concession that they brought in for first home buyers, where rather than you paying the large stamp duty up front, you can actually flesh it out over, and it essentially becomes a bit of a forever tax until you sell the property. So it's small amounts. If you're buying a property worth $950,000, each year you might pay $2,000 to $3,000 per annum, and that's your stamp duty. But you're doing that until you sell the property. That was brought into play only as of the 1st of January this year. That was obviously held and it was implemented by Dominic Perrottet. As of 1st of July, they're already going to be removing it. So it's only going to be in existence for 6 months. And then the current government's scrapping it completely. So a good example of how quick things can change when legislation is implemented and then the state government doesn't like it or the federal government doesn't like it, so they scrap it. The forever tax, it wasn't a good idea because at some point you're not breaking even anymore. The government is. Yeah. And ideally, and the way they structured that was it's still revenue raising. They can actually set what the taxable value of your land is and therefore the market value. So you could tell there that they were really just lining their wallets, I guess, in 10 or 15 years' time. And that's just a bit of an example of how things can change so quickly.
And look at Anastasia Palaszczuk, that exalted leader of Queensland. She wanted to charge stamp duty on assets in not even her state.
Yeah, that's right. She scrapped that very quickly.
Yeah, exactly.
Just before the budget, I think it was announced. I think it had 3 weeks of traction, and then I think the night before they're like, actually, no, we're just going to draw a big red line through that one.
Because all the other states said we're not going to share with our data. Why would we do that and give you money? Then it's our money.
Exactly right. I imagine who came up with that idea as part of the panel.
Genius. It'd be some guy wearing leather, elbow pads, but he works in a room with no windows, and but mate, I think we'd wrap it up there. I think we just really want to jump on and say doing something's better than nothing. There's a lot of people out there who don't know where the next 5, 10, 15, 20 years is going to be, but you need to do something. But whatever you choose to do, it needs to have the flexibility and malleability for you to change your mind. That's the biggest thing we always talk about. Make the most of your time overseas. It's too many people sitting on cash going, what do I do? What do I do? When in actual fact, you need to, in the good and bad, keep putting one foot in front of the next. And it's a great Chinese adage, which I'm going to absolutely screw it up. But it's something a journey of 1,000 miles starts with that first step. And I think it's so true with financial planning and managing your assets as an expat. You just got to start today. Start putting things in place. It's funny how a year later, you go, oh wow, it's working, and all this analysis that I was trying to combine is virtually for nothing, and we're getting closer. So, folks out there on the podcast, just start today, guys. Just a couple of housekeeping issues. Just another plug out there for the Australian Expat Financial Forum Facebook group. Growing pretty quickly, lots of good content on there, lots of good debates between Australian expats managing their money. We do have 4 seminars coming up, webinars and seminars. So 10th of May, we have our Australian Federal Budget seminar in Dubai with the Australian Business Council. 11th of May, we're in Abu Dhabi with the Australian Business Group Abu Dhabi. And then the following week, I think it's the 16th of May, we're online for folks around the world. And then I don't have the exact date, but I will put it in the link below. We're doing a end of financial year webinar, tax tips with myself and Ben Turner, who's the managing director of tax. So a lot of things coming up. I'll put them all in the links below for everyone. Thank you very much for your eyes and ears today, folks. Hopefully it's been a benefit. And most importantly, thanks to James for your time.
Thank you, Brett. Thanks, guys, for tuning in this episode. Cheers.
Thanks, guys. Oh, actually, by the way, I've got to do something. All the information you hear today, it should be general in nature. It should not be construed as financial advice.
Leave it to the...
Yeah. If you are watching this, you would have seen this coming up in the boat, so we're fine. But if you're listening to this, just listen to the end first and then go backwards.
Oh, we're good at podcasting, aren't we? Anyway, guys, thanks for tuning into today's episode. See you on the next one.
We're loose. See you later.